Today is November 28th, 2006. We're at the home of Mr. David Allen in his home in Fort Collins, Colorado. My name is Brad Hoops. I'm the interviewer for the Northern Colorado Veterans Oral History Project. Good morning, Mr. Allen.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for participating in this project.
Okay.
Let's start out, if we can, if you can give us a little background about yourself, where you were born and your date of birth.
Well, I was born in Benton, Kansas, December the 29th, 1921. And that's a small town in Kansas. And we lived on a farm, and that's what we did, was farming, and had horses. We did everything with horses at the time. So it's back quite a ways. And
Tell us a little bit about your parents and how many siblings you had.
well, there was 9 children altogether, and I was the last of 9. I'm the youngest. I have two relatives, one brother and one sister left. My sister there in Topeka, Kansas, is 93 years old, and she still works at McDonald's restaurant. And when she was 80 years old, she was honored as the oldest woman in the state of Kansas, still drawing a paycheck. And my brother in Augusta, Kansas, he is 81, and they just moved from their regular house that they had into a smaller apartment unit, and so they're getting acclimated to that. It's not anything that you can just turn off and turn on. I found that out when I moved here, because I moved to Colorado, I think it was in '56, I believe. And so I've been here ever since. I worked in Denver, worked out of Denver, and then my boys all moved up here to Fort Collins, and they said, "Dad, we got to get you up to Fort Collins." So 18 years ago, we moved up here, and have enjoyed it very much since. And my boys are, one of them is a doctor, one of them is a pharmacist, and Janine's husband is the doctor. He had a practice here in town for 27 years, and he now is head physician at hospice. So they're both in pretty good places.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing prior to entering the service?
Well, I was just a youngster on the farm helping Dad. My job was, when I got up in the morning about 4 o'clock, was go down and feed the horses, put the harness on them, and he would go milk, and then I'd go slop maybe that slop wasn't the right word, but that's what we did. We slopped the hogs. Yeah. And when I got done with that, then I'd go over and help him finish milking. And so that was my morning chores. And then who knows what it was after that when we got those 4 head of horses. Well, we really had 8 head of horses. And we was always doing something with the horses, farming, plowing, cultivating corn, whatever. So then I was drafted into the service, and everybody said, "Well, you can skip that, you don't have to go, you know." And I said, "No."
Because of your farm?
Yeah,
okay.
farm activities.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "No, I'm not going to, I'm going to go." So I just went.
When were you drafted, roughly?
Oh, I went into the service in 1942 in June. That was shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Do you remember where you were and what you were doing when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I was over in El Dorado, Kansas. My brother-in-law was down from Fort Riley, and he was going with my sister at that time. And we were over there messing around, and we pulled into a place to get some drinks, and he had the radio on, and he heard about this. We heard about it there on the radio. So that's where it all happened, as far as that part was concerned. And of course, he had to rush right back to Fort Leonard Wood. I mean, not Fort Leonard Wood, Fort Riley. And so I had to take him up to Fort Riley that night. So it, we had fun though. And so that's basically where I was at and what I was doing when this all happened. And I didn't know at the time that I would be involved, but I finally got the letter that said, "Greetings, you have been selected." So
how much longer after you were drafted did you actually take off for boot camp?
Oh, I'm not sure. I expect maybe a week, 10 days. It
Really?
went right on. And we went down and they put us on a train, and we headed off out of Wichita on a train to go to Fort Lupton. Not, give me the right name. Up to Fort Riley. Went up to Fort Riley. We got up there and they didn't have any place to put us. We got over there by evening and we didn't have any place to put us, so we had to stay out in the street all night. Just laying on our duffel bags, sitting on the concrete and just leaning back against your duffel bag and get some sleep. And the next morning they got us up and said, well, we're getting you ready to load to go to Fort Leonard Wood. That's where I did my boot camp, was Fort Leonard Wood. So we had a little paperwork there at Fort Riley, and then we got on the bus and went down to Fort Leonard Wood. And they unloaded us in there. It was kind of nice and warm in Fort Leonard Wood in June. And so we had the old 6th Engineers was just coming back from maneuvers down out of Mississippi. And they didn't know exactly what was going to happen to them, but they threw us all in with them, put a new cadre in there. And so we took our boot camp, 6 weeks I believe, there in Fort Leonard Wood. And then all of a sudden we got a notice to load all of our equipment on flat cars, trains, and tie them down, block them down so they couldn't get away. And then we had to ride on those vehicles to Arizona. We were on our way to California. Well, not yet. It was California because we got out there on the desert in California around Blythe, and we was going to do desert maneuvers. We thought, sure, Africa was our port of entry, getting out there. Well, we dug tank traps and everything you could think of out there in that desert. Traveled around all over, driving at night. It's so cold out there. And I drive a command car at that time. And I had a half track always in front of me. So whenever we stopped, well, I'd crawl off of my command car and run around, jump up on the hood of that half track because it was 1/4 inch steel. And it held heat quite a while. So I kept warm that way. But a lot of times we just pour gas in the sand, dig a hole and pour gas in the sand. And that would be our warmth that we had out there tonight. Well, we thought, okay, Africa, here we come. Well, they moved us into California, San Luis Obispo. And we was there, I don't know, a month maybe. And all of a sudden they said, going down the ship dock. I think it was dock number 2 that we went out on. So we went out under the Golden Gate Bridge and headed for somewhere we didn't know. And we ended up in Hawaii. We was on the island of Oahu for 6 months. We were in charge of the demolition on the Pali Pass. Now the Pali Pass has changed a lot since I was there because it was just a shelf road. And they had places dug where they could blow this thing up just in a second. And we had to go in there, and it had TNT in it. So old, that TNT was so old that some of them had copper casings on them. But we'd have to take one of those out, put a new one in, and go blow this one up, see if it would still explode. And so that's basically what we...
Dangerous work.
Yeah, what we did. Well, we did a lot of dangerous work farther down the road. But we spent 6 months there building huts up on the coastline for the guards to live in. There's not live in, but stand in, And of course the barbed wire was still on the beach at Waikiki Beach when I left there. And the largest building outside of the capital of Hawaii was the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. That nice pink hotel over there. And of course they turned that into a rest place for submariners. And so we didn't get to fool around there very much, but we had fun. It was really kind of interesting because everywhere you look was a few Japanese people. They had they'd have little roadside stands selling pineapple and whatever else they had, you know. So it was kind of neat. It was kind of a neat thing.
How was it like for a Kansas farm boy to cross the ocean and be in Hawaii? What was the crossing like?
For me, it was very smooth. The
Okay.
water was just as smooth as this floor here.
Hmm.
And the flying fish were coming out of the water and flying, you know, they fly quite a ways. They call them flying fish. And there were some poor boys that didn't fare that well.
Yeah.
I never did get seasick on any of my voyages. And I had a few of them. But that from Hawaii to New Guinea, actually, was where we went. And they did stop us over at one place. They was fighting at this particular spot, and as we went by, they stopped our boats there. We never did get off of them. We stopped our ships there, and hold us over in case they needed some more troops. But they took care of it, and then they took us on up to Milne Bay in New Guinea. And when we landed in Milne Bay, it was 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and rained every day. And so they wouldn't let us out of our tents for 3 days. We had to swing around through the tents to go even to the latrine and to the dinner tent, you know, because they didn't want us to get too hot but it was hot. Well, that kind of acclimated us, and then we started building storage buildings over there. And farther up the coast we went, where we started building bridges. We did our own work with the sawmills. We had our own sawmills. We cut down our own trees, and we drove pilings into the water and made a dock out. A couple of docks. We built a couple of docks up there. And then the interesting part of building a road over the New Guinea, you get into these places where it's just sinky, and you dump rock in there, and at the time you got back with another truckload of rock, it was gone. And so we finally had to get the infantry to come down. We cut down trees and corduroyed this road, just laid trees, double wide, so. And then we put dirt over the top of that. That way we could grade a ditch along the side, and we could get rid of some of that water and slush. So that was our. We used to drive all night, you know, hauling rock. It was a 24-hour problem, and so that's where we did that. But I spent 11 and a half months in Hawaii. In New Guinea. My first Christmas away from home was in Hawaii. That was a little different.
Had you had a chance? Let me back up a second. Had a chance to get home on a leave before you shipped out from the time you left for boot camp?
I left boot camp. I got 3 days off before we went. So we had an early Thanksgiving dinner that year. But
so that was the last you'd been home.
The last I was home. Yeah.
How was it that first Christmas away? And
well, it was a lot different because, you know, they didn't have very many Christmas trees to put up or anything like that, and so you just kind of decorated what you could to make it look like Christmas, and you of course sing some good Christmas carols and some good religious songs and make out the best you could. We lived in Quadrangle D there at Schofield Barracks, and we had that kind of decorated up. That one there, you could still, you probably can still see it, but we could see where the Japanese planes had strafed the building and chipped out because it was a concrete type building. Had stuccoed over it, I think, but they had strafed that building pretty good. And, so we didn't have any problems. I was driving a Jeep when I was over there. I was a courier, and we had little slits in our the glass on the lights, you know, just a little bit of a slit. So you didn't have much light to drive around with. But I always got the officers around. I got into my first football game too, my very first football game in there, because my company commander, who I was driving for, he said, "Dave, we're going to a football game tomorrow." And so I said, "Okay, that's where you got to go." So we drove up and he went into this football game. We sat there and all these people were just having a big time. And I'm sitting there, what are they doing? You know, couldn't even figure out what a football game was because I hadn't seen a football before. Yeah, I was a kid out in my country where you didn't have all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot of things that well, I always say I wouldn't take $1 million for what I did, but I don't want to do it over again. So I didn't have to. So that's up to about as far as we can go in New Guinea, I guess. We jumped off from New Guinea, and we went to Hawaii. I mean to Manila, Philippines. We went in on the 5th wave of the Philippines, and I saw a picture on television here a while back. I don't know whether it was our ship or not, but it looked very much like it. We had come up there, and we were supposed to go in on the 5th wave. We unloaded over the side on the ladder down into the boats. They went out, and we circled around out there, and all of a sudden we run back up by the ship, and they said, "Board." So we went back up. Well, they had some stuff happened on the shore, and they didn't want us in there yet. And so, second time we went in all right. We got in all right. Well, that night, unbeknownst to us, they had brought in a Bailey Bridge sometime or another. And we had...
What's a Bailey Bridge?
Well, there wasn't any bridges left across the river going into Manila from where we landed. We went right up through the middle of it and cut the thing in two, the island in two, and then went into Manila. Only we couldn't get there because there wasn't any bridges left. So Bailey Bridge, I saw one of those put up here the other day too on television, training. It's a section bridge that it's all steel, and you line it up across the river. You line up so that when you get it over there, it will set itself down on your piling that you've got over there. So you keep putting these pieces on here in the back and then pushing it out.
Okay.
Another piece, pushing it out. Well, when it got out there quite a ways overhanging, it was pretty hard to push. And but we just had enough men, we had to push it out there. So we worked all night on that. We had a big fire going to make coffee. And we thought that was kind of unusual, here. Down in the bay there where the ships were, Japanese planes were coming in there and strafing them, and wasn't bothering us at all. So we got that Bailey Bridge done, and then they could get troops and tanks across over into the city. And they was doing that on one of the old pictures the other night, and I kept telling them, "Get those pins in there. Remember those pins in there?" They were doing theirs on a pontoon, which they could do. Made it a little easier because if you got it out there and got it down, then you had it on a float. But ours was just straight out like that, and we had to get it over across the river. I don't know that river. I don't know. It might have been 30 feet wide. I don't know, 20, 30 feet wide, I suppose. But maybe more. I don't know.
Did you have to drive? You drove the pylons as well, or used existing pylons?
Well, no. We had. They make a big pad. It comes right with the ship. I mean, the
Bailey
bridge. And so you have to send a group over on the other side and line this all up and set those big pads down so that this thing will sit on that big pad, and then put your ramp on down to go to the ground. So that's what it sat on.
Okay.
It was an interesting bridge to build because you just take this 4 guys, you get on that section, and on each side, 2 on each side, and you take it out and you'd have a guy up there with the pin and the hammer, and one down at the bottom, and as soon as they got that thing in there, you put that pin there and hammered it in, and key it off so it wouldn't come out. And, it was a good bridge. It would hold good. It wasn't as good a bridge, though, as I built in the Philippines. We built a bridge in the Philippines. And we built that out of old Japanese flatbed trucks. I have a picture here showing that. I don't know whether you can do anything with it or not.
Yeah, what I'll do at the end of the interview, we'll photograph all the pictures, and you can describe what you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have some pictures. Yeah, we made this bridge out of the only way we could get across the river, and we built this thing and had to put treads on, you know, so the tanks could drive over it. But to walk the infantry over it before, to put the tanks on it, just to make sure that they could get the infantry over. And then they brought the tanks over and held up good. Held up good. I don't know how many old trucks was in there, but scrounged every one we could find. And put it out there in the river and took the cat out there and banked rocks up against the front end of the trucks to hold it in there. And it used it a long time.
Can I back up a little bit and ask how you got into the engineers? Was it your background? Why you were chosen into that?
I would think so, being a farmer and drove tractor and trucks and everything before. So I didn't ask for any particular thing. They just assigned me to 6 engineers, and that was it. And I felt good in there. I felt like I could do some good. And so I drove Jeep all the time out in, well, I drove command car, I guess it was, out in San. When I was out in California, I hauled a company commander around in that. And then when I got to WWII, they gave me a Jeep, and I was a courier on that Jeep. One time I went down to get my Jeep, and they said, something needs work done. He said, you'll have to take that motorcycle over there. Well, I had never been on a motorcycle, and it was raining a little bit, and I said, well, I'm not sure about that motorcycle business. If I have to go on that today, I probably won't go. And I said, I'll try it though. So I started out, I got out the front gate, and I turned her around and headed her back to the place, and I said, you got to find me a Jeep if I got to do all this. So they found me another Jeep. I think they were just trying me out. We had a lot of fun doing things like that.
Well, when you talk about building bridges to get infantry and tanks and such across, before they crossed, what was between you and the Japanese? Was there
was troops that waited across, you know, but to get a big force across, they always put the scouts out there to see what it was. Of course, that didn't make any difference. We got out ahead of the Japanese a number of times. You know, one night we pulled up to a little town and unloaded everything, and they fixed supper for us, and everybody was setting up their cots and so forth to stay. And so a bunch of us guys said, well, let's get our guns and we'll go down to this little town and see what's going on. Just walk down. And we walk around down there, and those people look at us and wonder, what in the world are those people doing here? And so we thought, maybe we're in the wrong place. So we turned around and went back to camp, and we were in the wrong place, all right. They had loaded everything up on trucks again, and ready, waiting for everybody to get back. And we pulled out with that. I was on the turret of a 50 caliber machine gun in our truck, and I sat there all the way from there back to camp, where we could get back at the lines. We were 10 miles ahead of the infantry.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And one other time we got out ahead of the infantry, and it wasn't too bad. We was building a little, there was a stream there, and we was building a bypass to this bridge that was there, because they had to repair the bridge. And we was out there working quite a while, and all of a sudden we looked back, and here come the infantry at high port, and they said, what in the world are you guys doing out here? I said, well, we're fixing this bridge so you guys won't have to get your feet muddy. Yeah. So we had a lot of fun that way. And while we was in the Philippines, we had another exciting situation come up. They called us and said, get on your trucks, we're going over to this prison camp. Now, I know I don't pronounce it the way the people on television pronounces it, but it was to me, it was the Cabanatuan prison camp. And that's where all these prisoners were held that they marched out of Bataan and Corregidor. And so when we got started to go over there, before we left, we said, well, we need some candy and some cigarettes to give those guys, you know. So we drive up there and we load all this up and give those guys this candy, and as we're driving back, well, they were throwing the cigarettes out to the Filipinos along the road, and the candy, they didn't care about that. They was trying to show their gratitude to those Filipinos who had been helping take care of them all these years, you know, that they'd been in this prison camp. And I saw a picture of that the other day too. The 6th Rangers went in there and hid in the brush one night, and they was going to take us camp the next morning. And all of a sudden that morning, something happened for the Japanese. They pulled out all the Japanese except just a few to guard, see that everything went. And so the Rangers just walked in there like this old colonel, Ranger Colonel, he had his pearl handle pistols on either side. He was a tough old boy. Yeah.
Can you describe what you saw in the camp and the condition of the guys? And
Condition of the guys, I didn't get really to see the camp, but the condition of the guys were bad. I mean, just skinny bad. And in fact, after I got home and was traveling, I traveled southern Colorado and northern New Mexico as a salesman, and I ran into one of the prisoners that had been in that camp down in Montrose, Colorado. And he was doing quite well, but I don't know, I didn't really know who he was at that time, but yeah, he told me he was in that camp. But they were so happy to see us that they just piled in that truck like they knew they was going to go home, you know. So yeah, they was in pretty bad shape, I'd say. There's some little cases that we hauled back, and some others just of skin and bones. You couldn't see how they could live, you know. But they fared out pretty well. I did see General Macarthur one day. I was working on a road, and he come driving out, or he didn't drive. He had his driver bring him by in a Jeep, and he stopped right in front of me where I was digging. He didn't speak to me, or I didn't go shake his hand, but he and his corncob pipe. Yeah, I liked him. I thought a lot of him, because he did what he said he was going to do. And I know he had a lot of men back of him, and we lost a lot of men in that war there. But he got the Japanese to sign a treaty anyway. I know, I was scheduled, see, I ended up going to Korea as occupation troops too, before I got to come home. From the Philippines, my company commander said, David, I'd like for you to take your troops up there and unload ships for us for a while. He said, we'll be sending a lot of ships up there. And I said, well, if that's what you want me to do, that's what I'll do. So, there was a point system at that time. And I had points enough to go home, but he said, tell you what, if you take that group up there, you're going to get home before some of the guys that stays here on points get home. So this old friend of mine, I said, he and I played bridge all the time together, not bridge, but cribbage all the time together. And I said to him, you better come along and go up there with me. No, he said, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to beat you home. And so I said, well, okay. I heard it the other way around. They're not going to be bringing stuff in here like they were, but they're going to take it up there. And my company commander told me, you get home quicker. So I was only up there a month. And when I got home, I wrote him a letter and put the postmark on it, or posted to APO, whatever. And he got the letter and wrote me back one, and I told him I was home. He's still sitting over in the Philippines. Yeah. So.
Well, that has a question along those lines. How was communications between? Did you able to communicate with home and family and friends? How easy was that, or?
You couldn't do anything but write letters, and you had to write V-mail letters.
Can you explain to the what a V-mail was to
Yes.
to the viewing audience?
I had one, and I looked for it this morning, and I couldn't find it. Her husband said something. He had seen something about V-mail, and I said, "Oh, I've got one of those downstairs somewhere that I wrote to my mother." And it's just a little old piece of envelope, like you get a lot of days now. It's a very near a thing about this long. You only have about that much room to write, and then you get this fold over. You just fold it over and you address the thing, and it's gone. And then they copied that letter and send it to the folks. And so that's what I had. I always, of course, looked at them quite closely to see that there wasn't anything in there that you shouldn't be telling. And so I watched that very closely. But yeah, I couldn't find that little rascal this morning. It's around here someplace. But that was the only communication we had.
Fairly reliable, fairly.
Well, yeah, as the mail went, it was, it would take a month to get you a letter, but, so wasn't too bad. Now you pick up a telephone, call them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we didn't have that kind of stuff. Yeah.
What about news from home or news from how the war was going in the Pacific, how the war was going in Europe? Were you up to date on that? Over there in the Philippines, obviously the war ended in Europe earlier.
Yeah.
Did word get to you about that?
It was later, a couple of 3 days later. I know there's some fellas got shot even after the war was over, after it was signed. But there were some people shot in that wait,
Do you remember where you were? You heard that like President Roosevelt had died, and the war had ended.
Yeah, I was somewhere in Baton. I don't know that I can tell you the name of the town, but I was somewhere in Baton. You see, we had to go in there and take that the watershed, not Marikina, Bikini. Anyway, it's the watershed where all the water came down for Manila, and they put us in there to take over that property, and we went in there and took it, and then after we got it all taken and it shut down, they moved us out again and put the 38th Division in there, and then here come the 38th Division. They started coming back the wrong way. They were supposed to go on forward, and they turned around and got back the wrong way. Well, they had to pull us back in there and back them up again then. So, yeah. One night, with engineers, where we had plenty of equipment, and so we'd just dig our trench like this with a cat, and across the front up here, and then we put the officer's tent up here in front of that. And we'd sleep down in this trench. And we'd sandbag over everything around the officer's tent up in front. We didn't have any cover over us. We was just down in the ditch on the cot. And we heard this coming across there, and bang, it went right in front of the officer's tent. That shell landed right in front of the officer's tent. Well, those Japanese never sent another shell that night. And they were looking right down on us because they were sitting in that hill right over there. You can see where it came from. And it was just straight over there. By the crow flies, it wasn't too awfully far, I would say. Probably a mile or two, maybe. The infantry went up the next morning and took care of it. But yeah, I went off there. We lost a lot of equipment with that one bomb shell tore up some of our trucks. But those officers were scared to death because they was down in there, they was in their hole, but they had a sandbag up there and blew a bunch of sandbags up. And so it was kind of, it was just, this one guy was from Iowa. He was a corn farmer, and he was a clumsy little boy, and we were down in his trench, and when he heard that bomb going off, he tipped his tent up and started digging and digging and digging, and every time another noise come, he'd pull his cot back over the top of it, like the cotton picking canvas top was going to do him much good. Yeah, he was a scared little boy.
How were overall conditions? How would you describe did you feel like you get enough sleep? How was the food, clothing, and such overall? You talk about sleeping in a trench.
Yeah, we just, bulldozer blade was so wide, and they just go in there and run this dirt up over the top there, and that was the trench that we slept in. And you ask about food. Normally, we had pretty good food. In New Guinea, going back to New Guinea a minute, we never ate any lamb because there wasn't any lamb shipped in there. I think they shipped the lamb over to Australia, and Australia put in their old mutton and sent it over to us. So we, as engineers, we'd go down and dig a trench, and they'd just unload that into the trench and cover it up. Cooks wouldn't dare cook it. Nobody would have eaten it. It was terrible. And then we used to get things like salmon, and we'd get salmon. We'd have salmon every way you could think of fixing it, because they didn't have any way of keeping it cool. So they would cook it up and then fix it for baked salmon, everything it seemed like. And one time we were really happy about this one. We was in a town and they couldn't get any food to us. So what did they do? They flew over there and dropped crates of eggs to us by pressure. And there was those big double crates, you know, and about this high, I don't remember what there's 30 dozen in them, I think. So they'd drop those in there, and they did a good job of it, because it didn't make didn't make mixed eggs with it. We had eggs however we wanted them. The cooks would say, walk up there, how many do you want? How do you want them? Well, I'll take 3 sunny side up or 3 overdone or whatever, you know. But we had to eat eggs a lot, pretty fast there to get those cleaned up. I wouldn't have thought they'd drop airdrop that eggs in there. That was kind of a strange thing. But we was glad to get the food. They had other things in there too. We was glad to see those eggs because we hadn't seen one. The Filipinos used to treat us real good when we first went in there. They would take killed chicken and put it on a stick and roast it over a fire for us, bring it over and give it to us. Yeah, they were really good. They were glad to see us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they did our laundry for us and everything. And of course, then being a United States guy, you know, you make a mistake. You pay somebody to do your laundry. And then the next time the gal come around, she wants her money too. So it was long till we was paying for laundry. And that's why we built this. That's why we built this washing machine. We built a washing machine. We Maytag or none of those wanted to use it. Wanted to use that style, but we built us a washing machine. And dear, we finally traded it off for an ice cream machine. We were the only. Janine, I guess I didn't put one out there. We were the only ones in camp that had, in the battalion, that had an ice cream machine at that time. So, yeah, here's a picture too. I found a stalk of bananas up in the jungle there one day, and so I decided I'd take those. And somebody had told me to take them out and soak them in the salt water, and then take them in and put them under your bunk, where it's dark. And so I had ripe bananas for about a week. There was the people come over and have a ripe banana with them. I got a picture of me carrying them down the road here.
How was it, growing up on the farm? Probably didn't travel too much of a distance away from the farm to find yourself in the jungles. I mean, what kind of adjustment was that in the jungles and the conditions of New Guinea and the Philippines to adjust to that kind of?
Well, it was a complete adjustment of any kind, because our tents always leaked. And we'd try to get the quartermaster to give us new tents. And they would say, well, you've got to get them dried out before we can inspect them. Well, there's no way you're going to dry it out, because it rained every day. And I mean, when I say rain, it just goes, sheets of rain would come down. And it didn't last long sometimes, but it would just pour. And of course, everything mildewed. And of course, too, we had so much problem with mosquitoes. And so,
was there any worries of the various diseases that?
Typhus and malaria. In fact, I had a malaria attack the day I was married. After I got home, I had brought enough Adderant home with me that would hold me over. And that morning, I was needing to take some Adderant and some aspirin because I was hurting. And so then they put me in the hospital, and they gave me a little damage, you know, when I was, what am I trying to say? They gave me a little pension for being that way. And then as soon as I could prove by taking blood tests that I didn't have malaria anymore, well, then they took my little pension away from me.
So you weren't aware that you'd had it until you got home and...
No, I did. I had it on my body, but it didn't break out because I had been taking it. My body was just as yellow as could be.
Huh.
Everybody saw me when I take my shirt off. Oh, you've got a beautiful suntan. And I said, no, it's an Adaman tan. Because that Adaman just turns your body yellow. Your fingers is all yellow. And so, yeah, that morning, if my wife had known I had that, or my girlfriend then,
Yeah.
if she'd have known I had that malaria, she'd have been fit to be tied. But I didn't tell her. I just went ahead and so I went ahead and got married that night. Oh, I was a sick boy that morning. All my sisters, I had 3 sisters in. They said, Dave, you got to go to the hospital. Oh, I can't do that. I'm going to get married tonight. So, yeah, that's the way we did it.
Well, can you tell me what where you were and what you thought when you'd heard that we dropped the atomic bomb and thus the war was over?
I was still in the Philippines when that happened. And yes, I was mighty glad, because we were preparing to go there. And we were being prepared to fight with everything we had and some of the things that they had, like sticks and stones and sabers and so forth, because we knew good and well if we went on to Japan just as troops like that, with no big help but big guns on the head of us, we'd had a battle on our hands. We'd had a battle on our hands.
They fought to the death.
They would.
Yeah.
I've seen those people hang themselves with their knees that far off the ground, hanging in a tree. Yeah.
Then surrender, huh?
They wouldn't surrender.
Yeah.
No.
Did you have any idea or any concept when they said this big bomb had dropped? And did anybody understand what the atomic bomb was at that time?
I didn't. I don't know. I suppose some of the officers knew what it was and so forth, had a little bit of an inkling. But I don't think that anybody would have thought of that much destruction with one bomb, you know. Yeah. As troops being out there in the field, I don't think we would have thought anything about that. We know what destruction with the napalm bombs that they dropped and with the regular bombs, but not with a bomb like that.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be anybody have any knowledge of what destruction could happen with that kind of a thing, other than who's working with it.
Yeah.
And probably the top officers.
Yeah.
But the old man in the field, why, he just, you know, so you do something nice so we don't have to go in there and fight, we'll be happy. We had enough of that.
Yeah. You know, I know there was some controversy. There's been controversy about us dropping the bomb, but from a soldier's perspective, it was, in your mind, it was the right thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
if we'd had gone in there, I probably wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah.
Because they would just fight to the death. And, if they couldn't die any other way, they would take the old knife and carry him. Seen that happen too. So I don't know. It was. When Macarthur went in there on the old Missouri and said he was going to sign that peace treaty, I thought, oh boy, am I glad about that. Good Lord's watching out for us when that happens.
Good sense of relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with the official surrender, then you were transferred. You took that transfer over to the occupation force in Korea.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And how long were you there?
I was there just a little over a month.
Yeah.
In November.
What were conditions like over there?
Oh, terrible. See, the Japanese had been in control of that place for many, many, many years, and it hadn't done anything as far as taking care of it, cleaning it up, this and that and the other. And it was a terrible place, dirty, smelly place. And that's it. When we pulled in there on that ship, when the tide went out, it would swing that ship clear around on its anchor. And when it went in again, it would swing it back around this way. And it would go in 5 miles. And as soon as the tide went out, well, you just see those people go out there and try to find something to eat, shellfish and stuff like that. Yeah.
What were your responsibilities there as part of the occupation force?
We didn't have anything to do with trying to control anything other than just get this merchandise off of these ships.
Okay.
Because there wasn't anybody else up there that I know of. I didn't see any other troops, but it was supposed to be, you know, everybody was supposed to be okay as far as being settled and so forth. But we didn't have any troop control or anything, but it was just get this stuff off of the ships and get it in here.
Okay.
And that was a long haul because that tide went out. That set that ship way out there in that water. And the only time I really enjoyed that was when I was, the night I loaded up on that ship to come home. We got on it as the tide was going out and it swung around and headed in our direction. And I'm telling you, they served us hot bread and all the kind of good food, because they were going to decommission that ship when they got it back. And so we took a kind of a round trip to get back to the United States. We went down around the Japanese islands, and then we went back up here towards the Aleutian Islands, and then back down to Seattle. And we was on the roughest ship that ride that I'd ever had, because those waves were, you'd look out one time and the water would be way up above you here. They wouldn't let us out on the deck. You could just look out there. That'd be up there 30 feet maybe. And then the next time you'd look out, here you'd be up there, well, where's everything? You know, because you're sitting up on top of one of those waves. And you couldn't tell where it was at. But no, they wouldn't let us out. There was about 3 days that we couldn't get out on deck because of that storm. So that was up by the Aleutian.
I mean, you survived that without getting seasick?
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah.
So you returned to the States via Seattle?
Uh-huh.
And then...
and I was 7 days in Seattle. And then I finally got on a train and brought us down to Fort Logan. And I was discharged from Fort Logan. I was examined and discharged. And I pulled a little wax out of my ears was all they could find wrong with me. So.
But at that point, were they aware that you had the malaria?
Oh yeah, we've been on my records, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, they didn't know that I had malaria because I didn't ever turn it in as malaria. Come think about it, I never did turn in for malaria treatment, other than I was just taking the Ativan. And if you didn't take your Ativan, you was going to get it, you know. So I just kept taking Ativan all the time I was over there. And I didn't know this till after I got back into Wichita, and when I had to go to the hospital. Then after I got married, well, I went to the hospital.
Yeah.
The doctor said, well, you just got a case of malaria.
Okay, so it was diagnosed then?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
back in Wichita. Yeah. And of course, then the veterans come in, veterans of foreign wars, they came in and took my power of attorney and everything, and then got my pension going, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And, but as soon as I could prove there wasn't any, I had to go get tested every so often and see if that malaria was still in there. And whenever they found out it wasn't, well, then they cut my pension off. It was a big one, $21 a month. Yeah, I get a kick out of these youngsters that, you know, they're in the service now, and if they're over there 2 months, they're being abused. I was over there 3 years, couldn't talk to my friend, my mother, or anything. And we were 121 days in combat without rest. I have somewhere around here, I've got the picture of that. I had a bulletin on it. But yeah, we had 121 days, most of anybody in the group. Our engineers was in there 121 days.
How do you, with 121 days of continuous combat, not the best conditions, how do you think how did you make it through that? How did I don't know, from breaking down from fatigue, or just breaking down, or I mean, just with all the adverse effects throwing at you? I mean, 121 straight days is a long time. How do you think you made that through that?
I think we had we had good food, and we got our sleep at night by having plenty of guards out, you know, they'd change out. And I didn't worry about sleep. I didn't worry about much of anything over there. I was over there to do a job that I had to do and do it as best I could do it. And that's why I say I learned an awful lot over there. And when I come home, I put most of it back into practice, building this, building that, doing some building. But never did build a dock or never did try to fix a muddy road like that. One night I was hauling rock into that swamp, and man, I went in there and dumped that rock, and I was headed out of there. And that old truck, I had a 4-ton truck, and it would start sliding. And I put her, jammed her in another low gear, and I took her out of there. But it didn't get stuck. I thought sure I was going to get off there and get stuck in that mess. You just drive down and get a load of rock and come back, and everybody else would bring theirs in, and they'd dump theirs, and you couldn't hardly drive over that place because they just took it right down to the ground.
Okay, so when you were discharged at Fort Logan, were you on your own to get back to Wichita, or did they help you provide?
They provided a bus ride for me.
Okay.
Back to Wichita.
Do you remember? Were you able to let your family know that you were coming home?
Yes, I called them.
Yeah. You remember that moment when you pulled in and they met you and
I remember that moment real well because I was hurt a little bit about this. I don't know why they did this, didn't do it. Nobody met me at the bus station. Then I had to call from the bus station to my sister's house, and then she sent her husband over to get me. Well, the rest of them was all over to her house eating dinner. So nobody met me at the bus station. I was telling Rod that this weekend, and he said, well, that was not good. I said, well, they treated me better when I came off ship when I went on ship in California because they had milk and everything else for you to drink. And so I said, I got treated better there than I did when I went home. And my family was a loving family. They didn't, they wasn't that. But I just don't know why they didn't, somebody come down and meet me. Because my mom and dad, they were both pretty aged. And Dad passed away. I got back in December of 45. Yeah. And Dad passed away February 46. And so I missed all 3 years that I was over there with my family, and no, just letters. And so I didn't get to spend much time with him after I got home. But I had gone to work in Wichita at the Cudahy packing plant.
Almost right away when you got back, or did you have some
just
time
shortly right after I got back because I didn't have any money, and so I had to get to work. And so I got a job right away. And anyway, I worked there at the packing plant, and so I called him on Thursday night in February. And I said, now, I know you want those oats planted, but don't go out and plant them because it's cold out there. And he said, I said, I'll be out Saturday and I'll put them in the ground. And he said, well, that won't work. He said, they got to be in the ground Friday night, midnight. And I said, Dad, you're not going to the moon to harvest those oats. And that's what he was talking about. They had to be in by the light of the moon or something. Dark of the moon, whatever. But it had to be done by the moon. And so he went out and drilled oats all day on the old tractor. And cold south wind. And he come in and told Mom, he said, I don't feel very good. I'm going in and lay down on the cot in behind the old heating stove. And he never got up. Never moved. Mom had to walk a quarter of a mile because we didn't have any telephone or anything. She had to walk a quarter of a mile in the dark up to a lady's house east of us and get some help and let us call us so the kids would know. So I had a couple sisters living in Wichita at the time. And my brother was living over in Leon, I think. But anyway, that's the way it went. Yeah, he's out sowing oats. Yeah, we did most of our farming by horses We cut wheat by horses. We had a binder, cut wheat with the horses. Finally, we bought a combine and a tractor. I remember Dad bought the first tractor, W30, brand new W30 International. And he worried his head off because he didn't think he'd ever get that tractor paid for. Well, it's just like you buy a car, you put it on payments and you pay so much every you didn't pay every month on it like you did normally. Every season, you'd pay a big chunk, and finally got it paid for, and it worked out all right. He just knew he couldn't ever get it paid for. He hadn't bought anything like that. We had an old Model A Ford when I left for the service, and we still had that old Model A Ford when I came back. And it leaked, the top leaked on it and everything. And so I said to him one day, I said, let me go trade that thing off and let's get something different. So I went down and traded it off and got an old Chevy, little model Chevy. And we had a little better car then. But, yeah.
So you've seen in your lifetime a lot of changes in the way farming is from horses to these big old monster combines.
I just can't comprehend these monster combines. They can go through the field cutting wheat, and when they hit a place where the ground isn't very rich, they can push a button and a satellite up there locks it in, and when they come back to plow or plant, they got the fertilizer truck right behind them, and the fertilizer truck fertilizes that spot,
Yeah.
and away they go. Of course, that's probably up into $140,000. And my dad, if he had two $5 bills to run together, he was lucky.
Wow.
Well, we hauled cream and chicken and stuff like that into town. We had a bunch of Jewish people that Mom could dress chickens for, and they're pretty particular. But you had to leave the feet on them, you had to leave the head on them, and couldn't kosher them, of course. But that's what they wanted. They wanted everything. Eggs, they'd love to have us bring in fresh eggs from the farm. So every Saturday morning, Mom and Dad would load up the old touring car, the old Ford touring car, and take off to Wichita. Here's 18 miles out of town. And they'd go in and go around the streets peddling these eggs, and they had special customers, they knew what they were supposed to get.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like you're standing on the corner selling eggs, but anyway, that's the way we had to live back then.
How was it after being away in the military for 3 years to come home to civilian life? Did it take you long to adjust or decompress?
No, not really. I just said I've got to get at it, and so I went right to work. As I said, next spring, I went to work for on a golf course as a greenskeeper. My brother-in-law was working there, and he said we can use another man, so they put me on over there. And that pay wasn't great, but we used to wade the creek every night and pick out the golf balls and take them out and sell them, And so I started my first savings account with golf ball money.
Were you able to keep in touch? Did you keep in touch with any of your buddies
Yes.
over there over the years?
Yes, I had a fella in Idaho, Blackfoot, Idaho, and his name was Alan, A-L-L-A-N. And George, I kept writing to him all the time. We traded pictures back and forth of some of these have been over to his place, and some I may have some that he put over mine. I know he's got one of mine that I never did get back. But I don't know, it's been 5, 6 years ago, I guess. I sent Christmas cards to him again, and always did. And his wife called me back. She called me up. And she said, Dave, I just want to tell you that George had passed away. And so he went over with us. They had 3 boys, I guess it was. Yeah, he was a good friend. I'll tell you about another little incident that happened one time when I was down at Fort Leonard Wood. This guy from Hutchinson, Kansas, which is just 20 miles away from Wichita, you know. And so he and I decided we was going to hitchhike back to Wichita and to Hutchinson. And so we got our furlough set up. I don't remember now, maybe it was a week. I don't know how long it was, I don't remember. But anyway, we started hitchhiking down there on those roads in Missouri, and you didn't see a whole lot of cars. Well, it came dark, nighttime, and we didn't know what in the world we was going to do. We couldn't get, wasn't any cars coming by. And there was a big old barn sitting over here, and we went over and looked around through it, and went upstairs and got in the hay and went to sleep, you know. And in the middle of the night, while we heard these hogs going, that thing was loaded with hogs underneath there. But when we got up, got out of there in the morning, well, nobody saw us, I guess, because we got out early. And then we got out on the Butter Highway, and some guy, you know, it was gas rationing then and everything, but some guy from Hutchinson, Kansas, come by, he and his wife and little kid, and he picked us up. And he said, "Where are you going?" "Well, I'm going to Wichita." He's going to Hutchinson. And he said, "Well, that's exactly where I'm going. I'll take you right into Hutchinson. I'll drop you off at the farm." Just so they did. So we had, that was our experience of hitchhiking. Never hitchhiked again after that. I quit that. But we had a heck of a time. Yeah.
How do you think the war affected your life, or any thoughts on how it played into your life then, now?
Well, I'll
through
tell
your
you.
current life?
I'll tell you right truthfully. In New Guinea, I was sitting in a foxhole by myself, and all up the line there was foxholes, single guys in them, and right out there across the way was a big pile of brush. They'd taken the bulldozer and pushed this brush out. Japanese said, "Americans don't fight they don't fight legal. They push the jungle back and then fight." Because we had a big fire opening out there for fire lane, you know. So anyway, I'm sitting in this foxhole, and morning came, it was misting and it's cold. All of a sudden I heard somebody firing up here, and it just kept coming down, and I said, "Lord, I know you sent me over here, and I know that's what my job was to do, and I'm trying to do it. I want you to help me get out of this mess and get back home again." And I think that's what really helped me more than anything, was I turned my life over to Jesus Christ at that time. And I still do. I pray to him every morning, and I pray for my kids, my family, and other people that I know are sick or something. I go visiting. I prepare meals for other people. Just fixed a big turkey for our seniors. I'm president of the senior group at church. I fixed a big meal last Tuesday, Tuesday before last, for them. 20-pound turkey. I'm baking this over here in the house. After all, I'm nearly 85 years old. And now on the 9th, I'll be 85 on 29th of December. And on the 9th of December, this is what I used to do, but I'm not doing it anymore, but I'm helping. We have a prime rib dinner for our church. It'll cost them a thing. Church takes care of it. I have 110 pounds, 10 to 15 pounds of prime rib ordered. And we're going to feed 106 people, plus the servers. And we decorate the place up real nice, beautiful tables, and everybody takes a table and puts it together. But that was my first time that I'd ever really turned my life over to Jesus Christ. And I know that had to be the way I got home.
Yeah.
Because I was in some funny things after that. This thing after that, this thing that I was telling you about, where we was 10 miles back of the lines, there was 3 times that we found ourselves ahead of the infantry.
Wow.
3 times. One time after in the jungle in New Guinea, we was out shooting. We was going to build some roads, and we was out shooting area for the road to be shot. And all of a sudden, here come 3 Japanese guys down through there. Well, I pulled up my rifle, and I was ready to let them have it, you know. One of the other guys said, "Oh, let them go. The infantry will pick them up when they get back in there." Well, I guess they did, because they was headed for the company area. Now, they may not have made it to the company area, I don't know. But I didn't ever shoot a buddy. I never shot a buddy when I was over there.
Yeah.
Didn't have to.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of them lying around.
Can't imagine what that's like.
What that's like is terrible. And then when you see them laying in there and they're your own boys. We had this one hill that we took, and then they lost it. And the Japanese come back across it, and it started raining, and there was no way for us to get in there to them. And I say us, I wasn't in that business, but there was no way to get back up there. So they laid out there for about 3 days. And then when they went to pick them up, they just, and at one place there we was having lunch, and one of the cars pulled in to eat, one of the wagons pulled in to eat. And I went over by that car and I thought, what in the world? And then I realized they had been picking up cadavers. It just was a horrible mess.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
Yeah, just terrible. But the Lord kept me from all of that.
Well, as we start to wind down this interview, is there anything that I didn't ask you, or anything that you wanted to say, or any closing comments you'd like to make before we end here?
Well, I don't know that I've got anything special to say. I would, if I was able, I would go back in the service today. I just feel that way about my country. And I would serve my country just like I serve my Lord. I serve my Lord first, and then I serve the country. And then I serve me if there's anything left to serve. So basically, that's about where I would put it. And I know nothing more to tell you. I have said, and I did a while ago, said it again, I wouldn't take $1 million for what I learned and what I've seen. But I don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
But if I had to, I would. Even now, if I had to defend something around here, I do it. And, it not with guns, of course, but it's help. I get out here. This spring and summer, we're working on sprinkler systems and trimming trees. And I'm out there, and this young guy said, the president of the club here, he said, "How do you do all this?" And he said, "Look at you, you're a lot older than I am." And he said, "You wear me out." And I said, "Well, it's just in me. I got to get it out some way, so I just work it out." I do a lot of woodworking too in the garage. And that cabinet there I made this cabinet over here. I made a lot of tables. My granddaughter's got a marble table, a marble top table that I made. And it's 1/2 inch thick marble, and it's Italian marble, come in from Italy. I picked up 4 of those one day, and we made 4 tables out of them. They were $165 a piece. They were these tiles that laid in the bank floors, 22 by 22, I think it was. And I went down to the store down in Denver, and I told him what I was looking for was 9-inch trivets for my trivet boards. Well, he said, "I don't have anything like that," but he said, "I got something downstairs you could make some big trivets out of." And I said, "Well, let's go look at it." And he said, "Now, remember, I want to make you a deal on that stuff." And I said, "Okay." So we went down and looked at him, and I said, "Oh, no, 22.5, I don't have any use for that." But he said, "Don't you remember? I told you I was going to make you a deal." And I said, "Yeah. What's your deal?" He said, "I'll take $20 for all 4 of them." And I said, "Let's get them in the truck before you change your mind." So the old gentleman that I worked with down there, he said, after we got them all loaded and left, I paid him for them. I said, "Here, you owe me $10, because we always split everything we did. You owe me $10. And AB said, "Well, I'll give you $10, but what are you going to do with those?" And I said, "Well, it's not what I'm going to do with them, it's what we're going to do with them. We're going to make some tables out of those. I don't know what they'll look like yet. I haven't designed them. But My granddaughter's got one. When she has company over there, everybody's, where in the world did you get that table?
I'll be back.
You know, I made her an entertainment center like that too for her place. So I make a lot of woodwork things. We used to do a lot of our church over here. We used to be able to go into the mall down here and line up in there 3 or 4 tables and put crafts on it. And we'd sell them before Thanksgiving usually, or at Thanksgiving time. And we did real good in there. They just allowed us to work in there and didn't cost us anything. So whatever we sold, why we usually gave to the church, you know. Take out the expenses and give the rest of it to church. So that's basically what I do.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for your participation today in this program, and more importantly, I want to thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
What would you like him to take a picture of here? I mean, obviously that one.
Interesting situation too. When we was out there in San Luis Obispo, these are the kind of. Well, that's just a stalk of bananas I found out in the jungle there in New Guinea, and I went and cut it off and took it back in. The guy helped me carry it back into the company area, and then we took it out and put it in the ocean and floated it around out there, and then took it in, hid it behind the bunk, and we had fresh bananas for a couple of days there.
I suspect at that time, and particularly growing up on a farm, you probably didn't have a whole lot of bananas.
Oh no, I don't know that I ever had a banana. We used to get, if we got anything for Christmas, we got an apple or an orange. And one time here it is. The first time I ever found out there wasn't a Santa Claus, when I sat down at my plate for Christmas, it had a big lump of coal in my plate. Well, that's our washing machine that a bunch of us built there in, I think we built that in New Guinea, out some parts. We had a 50-gallon drum there that we used as a tub on the washer. And we come up with a gas motor and put it on there, and a gas engine, I should say. And we put that on there, and we washed our clothes in that all the time. And there were people from headquarters, they'd come over and want to know if they could wash their clothes in it. And finally we sold that, or we traded it, should say, for ice cream making machine, and electric ice cream making machine. So we was the only one in the whole company that had we got that from the Seabees. And anytime we wanted anything from the Seabees, well, we just send our man out and get what we wanted. And he'd come in with it, do out pretty good. This is the bridge that we built out of old Japanese trucks that we found over there in Baton. We had to get something across that bridge so that the infantry could get across it, just across that river. And so this was the way we had to do it. We put all those old trucks in there, and then we took a Caterpillar tractor and pushed rocks up in front of that in order to hold those trucks in line. And then we put heavy stringers across there because we knew the tanks had to go across too. So we got the infantry across first, and then we let them go take the tanks across, and it held up real well. The only time that anything happened to it, the flood came down there and washed 2 or 3 of those out, and we had to put them back in there. But other than that, it worked out real good.